Yeah, feelings, go away.
Not those.
Don't get too close. I'm delicate.
Back, I say.
My name is KJ, and you're listening to the Supernatural Opinions podcast, where some things in this world are supernatural. My pronouns are she, they, and this is the podcast where I talk to my fellow Supernatural fans about Supernatural, and we share our Supernatural opinions. Today we're recapping Season 1, Episode 18, Something Wicked, which originally aired on April 6, 2006. And here to help me do that are my guests of the week, Meredith and Julia. Meredith, introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Meredith. My pronouns are she and her, and I have exactly 2 lines of script for this episode, so it's gonna be fun.
Love that for you. And Julia, how about you?
Hello, my name is Julia. My pronouns are she, her, and I am happy to be here as always.
We're so excited to have you. Because Meredith only has 2 lines of script, editing KJ is in charge of the mythology section this week because this KJ did not do it.
I wasn't originally supposed to be here, so this is actually a really fun twist of fate.
But this episode will not contain spoilers for this episode and may reference previous episodes of Supernatural. But before we get into this episode, I want to take a minute to plug my other podcast, Series of Opinions. In January of 2021, we watched this episode of Supernatural and talked about it. My 2 friends, Faith and Moya, hadn't watched the show before at all. If you want to hear more of me talking about this episode of Supernatural or other things, that might be a good episode to start on.
Though they're a very good group, so I highly recommend listening to Series of Opinions.
Yeah, Moira is now on season 4 and Faith's now about to finish season 11, so she'll probably be on season 12 by the time by the time this episode comes out. So this episode really spawned a longtime love of the show.
Sucks to be them.
Yeah, you can also hear me fumble over the explanation I'm about to take another crack at for the episode title. I did such a bad job explaining it. This week's episode is titled Something Wicked, and that's a reference to Macbeth. By the pricking of my thumb, something wicked this way comes is a quote from Act 4, Scene 1 of Macbeth by William Shakespeare, one of the witches, followed by Macbeth, who has become the villain of his own story.
Love that for him.
Yes. And the Striga is our monster of the week, which is an Albanian myth that is also sometimes referenced as a witch. So that's the tie-in. The Supernatural Wiki page, once again, this podcast can't function without it, suggested that this was also a reference to the darkness in Dean. But I think that if this is a reference to growing darkness, it's in Sam. But we will get there.
Yeah, this isn't really the type of episode for a growing darkness in Dean, unless we're talking about backstory.
I feel like that is what the reference is too. But I feel like, if anything, Dean is growing out of his trauma, or at least into an acceptance of it. Whereas, Sam has a growing darkness in him that is growing.
He's really growing into his protagonist, creepy chosen one status.
Yes, that is very much what's happening. We will get very much into that in this episode. I have things to say. I took journeys this week. But this week's episode was written by Daniel Nauf. I think that's how you say it. There's a K and an N, so I'm always a little hesitant. And it was directed by Whitney Rancic. This is Whitney Rancic's 1 episode of Supernatural, but he also directed 10 episodes of Smallville, as well as a bunch of other things. Again, lots of Smallville crossover. And Daniel Nauf created a show called The Astronauts, which was on in 2021, and was involved in writing 11 episodes of The Blacklist, and also created and wrote another show, Carnival. Also his only episode of Supernatural, so we have a pair of one-offs in the writing and directing this week.
Fun.
Yeah, good times. On to the recap. KJ did their very best to keep this recap a little snappier than usual, because I know that there's going to be a lot of things to break down and sidebar about. So this episode takes place in Fitchburg, Wisconsin, with a voiceover of a small child saying a prayer before bed, a really common prayer for Christian children. I even know this one. I could probably recite this prayer.
Oh, wow. I can't.
I don't know. I feel like it's pretty common in a lot of the Christian denominations. I don't know which ones, but
yeah.
I've
My
definitely
church is
heard
just
this prayer
special.
before. I've definitely heard this prayer before. It's interesting that this episode starts with a prayer because I believe we have another actor that comes back as an angel / potential glimpse of a vessel moment like we have with Faith. So a dad is tucking his daughter in. She just wants her mom, and we learn that there's a sister who's in the hospital and therefore the mom is needed elsewhere. This house seems like a great house. We get a lot of shots of this girl's bedroom. I still think of Once Upon a Time anytime I see a glass mobile, and even though Emma's was unicorns and this one is moons and stars, it still reminds me of it.
Still very Doctor Who to me for some reason.
Huh, interesting.
There's a lot of creepy moments on that show too.
Yeah, this one gets creepy right quick. A hand grabs this girl and we see this hooded figure with this like glowy mouth, and the little girl like screams, and then immediately cut to Sam and Dean mid-argument.
It's like a Dementor's grandmother.
It really feels like Dementor, but we see more face.
That's why it's their grandmother.
Sam is reporting on his research that he's done, and the first source that he lists is LexisNexis. I don't know if you've ever used LexisNexis, but it is not just like a widely available product. It's a paid service. I used to have access to it as a criminology student. This is such a Stanford pre-law thing to even check.
What's it for?
It's like a legal database. Like you could look up legal cases on it.
I respect how much it rhymes. That's cool.
Yes. But it's not something that people just have. It's such a Stanford pre-law thing for Sam to be like, I checked LexisNexis. It's literally the very first thing he says he checks.
I guess his student account is still valid.
Yeah, still active. Sam's been looking for anything to indicate that there is a case. Their dad has sent them some coordinates, and there is no indication that there's a case in this town. But Dean is fully into his obedient son routine. But he keeps his sibling light by telling Sam that he's the oldest and therefore always right. If my brother's listening to this, which I doubt, that is true. Older siblings, always right.
Unless they're my older siblings, then I'm always right.
I mean, I always jump at the chance to remind my siblings that I'm always right.
It's just the truth. It's just the truth. Sam and Dean are in town and they're leaning against the car drinking coffee. Nothing weird is in town, but the barista was a conspiracy theorist. Good for them. Sam is not listening. He's very intently staring at something, or a lack of something, I guess. He asks Dean for the time, and it's apparently 4:10 p.m. on a weekday, but there is only one kid at the playground. This is where it's not just that we have another moment like in Faith, where we see an actor reused as an angel who we could see as their vessel in this universe. This is once again Erica Carroll, who plays Hannah / Carolyn Johnson / the nurse that I dubbed Nurse Caroline in Faith.
Oh my
it's
gosh.
the same actress again.
She's everywhere. Did she move?
Don't know what's happening here, so I'm just also gonna call her Caroline because she's unnamed and I gotta call her something.
That's probably a good idea.
She tells Dean that 5 or 6 kids have gotten seriously sick and people are overly cautious, hence the empty playground. This always felt kind of like, ooh, protective parents, but from a 21 perspective, fair enough.
Yeah, they're being smarter than we are.
Yeah, keep your kids at home. Keep them from other kids are germy. There's a potentially fatal illness going on. Keep those kids at home. Good parents, honestly.
They're being way smarter about this than we are.
Yeah, this made so much more sense in 2021. Dean and Sam head to the hospital, and Sam's CDC ID says he's a bikini inspector because Dean's a moron. Like, what if they blew the case here? Like, the whole point is, like, be confident and no one's even gonna look that hard, but, like, what if they had?
Where did Dean even get the idea that says bikini inspector?
I feel like he makes all of the IDs, so...
Okay, that would check out.
He made it. He's like, I'm gonna screw with Sam. Dean sees an upside down cross, which I think we've talked about that before.
We have a couple episodes ago for the tulpa.
Right, about like the symbolism of an upside down cross. They meet Dr. Heidecker, who tells them that they have 6 cases in 5 weeks of what they thought was bacterial pneumonia, but none of them are getting any better. Antibiotics aren't helping. A nurse comes by and mentions that it works its way through families, only the children, but each sibling gets sick one by one. Quick note about this blonde nurse here. I'm pretty sure her name's Betty or Nurse Betty or something like that. The actress is Stacey Copeland. She's very cute, but she's definitely typecast. She's had 2 uncredited roles on The X-Files, and then she's played an unnamed doctor or nurse on Nightman, Smallville, Saved, X-Files I Want to Believe, Christmas in Canaan, and Eureka.
Oh my gosh, I need to look up this one.
Eureka! I did not think anyone else knew what that was.
I've never watched it, but I'm definitely aware of it.
It's a weird one. It's interesting.
Dean gets a look on his face and asks to talk to the kids. I think this is when Dean realizes the similarities between this case and the case that we're about to hear about. They're both really horrified to hear out of the 6 kids, none of them are even conscious. They talk to some of the parents, including the dad from our opening scene, and their daughters, Mary and Bethany. Bethany's 13. They don't say how old Mary is, but she looked like she was maybe like 5 or 6 at like the most.
Just a wee tyke.
Yeah, both have pneumonia, and the dad tells them that Bethany's window was open definitely the second time, and Sam suggests like, yeah, that dad's got 2 kids in the hospital. He's probably not going to be home. Let's go break into his house.
I mean, you're right, but...
Sam and Dean look very out of place in Bethany's bedroom. 2 grown men. Her bedroom's like purple and it's like got little kid stuff all over it.
I would have wanted that bedroom when I was little, but I don't think I would have wanted it with the 2 fully grown men.
Literally, they look like they should not be there. But Sam finds a rotted handprint on the outside of the window frame, and cue the flashbacks. This is where this episode gets good.
Ooh.
This is what we're actually mostly here for.
There's a deeper meaning to this rotting handprint.
The transitions are great, from older Dean to younger Dean, played by Ridge Canape. I think that's how you say it.
Oh, yes, I liked his acting.
He's a very talented actor for his age. When this was filmed, he would have been fresh off of his role as young Johnny Cash in the biopic Walk the Line, which is a really good biopic.
Cool.
Young Dean is staring at a picture of a very similar handprint as John is packing up to leave them on a case, and this is where my notes just accepted that there was going to be tangents for real. So let's go off on this tangent. First, John is taking Dean through the rules, and let's talk about these rules. Don't answer the phone unless it rings once, then stops, then rings again. A safety code so that no one but John can call a motel room and be answered by an unattended 9-year-old.
So how many people do we know this code? Because they do have like other people on their network.
Unclear, but it seems like that's specifically like John. Like,
okay.
If it was like Pastor Jim, it would ring twice and then hang up.
Okay.
Dean is bored by this. You can tell he just wants John to get on with it and leave. Like, this stuff has been drilled into him, which makes me nervous. How much younger could John have been leaving them alone like this? Yeah. Dean is 9
How old is
and
this kid?
Sam is 5.
Oh, gosh.
Maybe 4.
I couldn't do anything when I was 9.
We're gonna get into the specifics of when this actually is, because I went down an unexpected rabbit hole that I'm more upset about than anything else that actually happens in the episode. But if John isn't back by Sunday, they'll call Pastor Jim, who I think lives nearby, like 3 hours away.
Man, Pastor Jim deserved so much more screen time. I want to get to know this man.
I have a lot of questions about Pastor Jim.
Right.
Sam, I believe, called Pastor Jim looking for John in season 1, episode 10. Like, this isn't the first time we're hearing about Pastor Jim. I'm still keeping track of any time a friend or acquaintance of John is mentioned, because I do want to know how many friends he actually has and how long he's been friends with them.
Anyone named Pastor Jim, they sound like they could be fun.
Pastor Jim and Caleb seem to be the 2 longest lasting of John's acquaintances.
I wonder if the whole reason that Pastor Jim even stayed in contact was because he cared too much about Sam and Dean to just drop them.
A lot of people are still in John's life because of the
You're
boys.
just like, he sucks, but he's got children with him.
All the doors and windows are supposed to be locked. They're supposed to stay in the room. And most importantly, watch out for Sammy. If something tries to bust in, shoot first, ask questions later. This child is 9 years old. He should not have a gun.
The gun is bigger than him.
Literally, it is
the kickback alone.
Upsetting. Sam is watching Thundercats, which ran from September 1985 to September 1989. This is approximately 1988, so that's good on continuity. Thundercats would have been
nice.
on.
I want to watch Thundercats.
Sam is like a little kid. He's watching cartoons, but I noticed he was very zoned out. Like, it was more than just, I'm watching TV, don't talk to me. He is just absolutely uninterested in anything that John and Dean are doing in this scene. He's got this blank look of, I don't care what's happening. I like 1,000-yard stare going.
I know. I thought he looked drugged.
Literally, he does not look okay. John doesn't say goodbye to either of the kids.
That's not cool when you have kids that have abandonment issues, John.
He just like, okay, I'm gonna be back in a couple days, but he doesn't even say bye. He just says, okay, we'll be back in a couple days, and closes the door behind him.
I think I mentioned earlier, like in a previous episode, that like John is like this legendary figure right now, but we saw him like briefly in shadow at this point, and it kind of gave us like a chance to start developing his character a little more. But this episode is very important for like complicating his character and slowly like stripping away the layers of legend. And now we as the audience are kind of being given the chance to see him as a father and form our own opinions about him. And they ain't good.
They're not good. Back with adult Sam and Dean, Dean feels that John sent them here to finish the job that, in John and Dean's mind, Dean screwed up for them. Dean apparently just knows that this thing is a striga, which Sam has never even heard of. Once again, John's journal comes up short for some reason. The striga is not mentioned, even though we as an audience know that he was hunting one. John could have at least put something in there, mark that any of this happened. As we get into the show and it gets more meta, we're going to talk more and more about how we as an